I can always talk to you like how AI might affect me, but
Ooh,
like
I
that's a long
that's a juicy
conversation.
topic. Okay,
What
what are your
what
thoughts on AI in healthcare?
yeah, how's it
Is it
going to
actually
affect
going to
you?
make a difference?
Well, remember when I talked about when being a doctor, the point is like you're the one whose job is to render judgment about health and like determine what the next step is. I know there's always these people like, oh, AI is going to change the future of medicine. And it is. It's going to change the same way like all other technology has, which is just going to make things more efficient in terms of being able to deliver care.
Hmm.
But the overall structure of you going into the clinic like, hey, I have a problem. Can you fix this for me? It's not necessarily going to change as much as you think. And I think the reason is simple is if you had some idiot, which a bunch of the AI tech bros are, go out there and say, I'm just going to replace doctors. Like, okay, the point of people going to a doctor is not to like simply get healthcare. The point of the person going to the doctor is the same reason you go to the mechanic. I can't fix my car myself. I need help and I need someone to do it for me because that's a shitload of stuff. You have a computer do it. If like saying we have a computer mechanic, if the computer mechanic screws up, who is responsible?
That's a good question. Well, who's responsible with an automated drone? Any
Exactly.
automation for that?
So going to medicine, if you make a service that's like trying to make an AI doctor, if the AI doctor does not give you care that is appropriate or is terrible, who is ultimately at malpractice here? Is it the if it you can't just sue a computer, but you can sue the computer's manufacturer, right? Or whoever made it. And if there's like, hey, well, we're just a tool. We're just a tool. We can't just sue us. You gotta sue the people who bought us. Okay, so now you're gonna sue the people who bought the tool. Okay. So now you have two people there that once those lawsuits coming in, it's like, oh shoot, if I employ an AI, they're gonna sue the company directly. They're gonna sue me. Shit. Okay, I need doctors back in here because I'd rather them sue the doctors and not me.
Hmm.
And if you're making the AI, it's like, oh shit, I've employed this thing to like 6,000 clinics, and now that's a lot of people like piling up lawsuits. I can't. We got to get out of this business now, or we got to find a way to like make it so we're like not being held responsible. Oh shit, we need doctors in there to take responsibility. And so the doctors will ultimately have to be the ones to just assume the responsibility for the decision. So that's why I know doctors and providers in general are not going to go away. Because even though you have the fanciest AI, people want to blame something when something goes wrong. And it has to be a person. They can't blame a computer. They can't blame a system. Either if they get rid of the doctor, that leaves a lot of people vulnerable to who's going to get blamed next. So we're going to keep doctors involved. So that's why I don't feel like I'm going to get like taken out. Yeah.
I am constantly amazed at how often it comes down to liability insurance when you
Well,
have
that
some sort of titanic shift.
Well, that's the big issue with AI in general is the liability it's causing. Like these large language scale models, all that stuff, like it has to learn from something, right? So when
Yeah.
you're learning from something, like no education is truly free, and everyone who gets information from anywhere on the internet, there's copyright associated and everything, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, allegedly. It depends on who you
allegedly.
ask.
But if there is a paper trail of any sort that says you used my thing to generate something like for your product, you owe me something. If you use my face to generate, like, use 500 faces to generate a random face, you owe those 500 faces something. You watched 1,000 YouTube videos. You owe all the people who made those YouTube videos or own those YouTube videos something. And that is just ultimately how it works. Because if you build a house, you have to pay for all the materials for a house, right? Even if you're building something that has nothing to do with like the plywood, you're using it to build something completely different
Mhm.
function. You're still using this component to build it, right? So you have to pay for those materials. So
Now, now
Now,
if you
this
build
brings up an interesting question, though, because do you structure that as a one-time payment or an ongoing royalties check? And the inner capitalist, competitive capitalist in me says that you should not have a royalty check from using a material like that. It should be a one-time payment.
and that'll be the cheapest option. Like, hey, look, I'll pay you $20 if I can use your face, right? And that'll be as simple as that. But
Mm-hmm.
you pay someone $20 to use that face, and then suddenly you use that. Suddenly, whatever project makes up $1 billion. Do you think those people are still going to come back and be like, "You only pay me $20. I want more, and I'm going to sue the fuck out of you because now you're using all this stuff, and I'm missing out on this stuff." It doesn't matter if it's fair, like whether or not it was a fair deal or not. I'm going to sue your ass to get it back. I think it's going to probably be a mixed model eventually, but that's just where it's going to come to. There's going to be acknowledgement of like people have ownership over data, people have ownership over like all these digital products that the AI is using to generate itself, to learn constantly. Eventually, those people are going to have to get paid somehow.
You know what I think this really drills down to? I am so surprised at the how often like somebody in tech will be Like, this is going to revolutionize things. It'll just be overnight. We'll have our AI overlords. And I think they kind of discount institutions as innovations in of themselves. I remember Uber did this too with kind of how they bowled over the old taxi system. They essentially just broke the law until they were so ubiquitous that they became the new law. And I'm worried that AI startups are kind of treating that the same way with copyright law. They're getting as big of data sets as they can find and making their models and trying to move fast enough that the legal institutions can't keep up with that. And I think, to your point, liability insurance is probably what's going to ultimately slow them down in the medical field and give them pause doing things more correctly. Because eventually, if you have a system trained on a lot of doctors making one giant mistake 6,000 times, it's different than one doctor in a system making that one giant mistake one time.
Exactly. And that's why I don't, again, we'll use AI in medicine to like be able to map these genomes, come up with these new chemicals, be able to help like streamline like systems of care. That parts of AI are going to be useful, and those have a clear use, just like how a general electronic health record, a digital health record has been a phenomenal like net benefit. It's still rough to use at points, but in general, it is like this is still better than where it was before. Still a lot to get used to, and I'm hopefully like pay for my eyes because it's destroying my eyes again. But like that part of AI and that part of technology is good. But when you have like a tech guy who's probably on cocaine and all kinds of stuff going up there, like I'm gonna replace. I won't have any need for doctors.
He's hopped up on something.
He's hopped up on something, and when I hear that, like that sounds like you had a shitty experience with a terrible doctor. You're gonna take it out on all the doctors and prove that your penis is huge and that you're better than everyone else because you're a tech bro and you got bullied in school.
That's what it's about, Nick. It's proving you're better than everybody else. Don't you know, like half the guys in finance, they weren't loved by their mothers. It's just a fact.
Now, to take devil's advocate here, right? Okay, I'm imagining some tech bro, right, that has created this digital doctor that's trying to take your job away. And I feel like the producer of that AI doctor could potentially be held liable for the medical decisions. Why couldn't either the producer or the person who's buying the tool have malpractice insurance that is potentially just another insurance product?
So kind of similar to where like, well, we'll pay it out and hopefully net-wise I still come out on top kind of thing.
Well, it seems like you're suggesting is that like if a hospital buys an AI system for diagnosis and treatment and care plans, essentially taking over a lot of the functions of a doctor, then the hospital should be the one to assume that malpractice insurance. Is that what you're arguing, Quinn?
Well, I mean, depending on where liability is found, either the producer of the doctor or the purchaser, like the clinic or the hospital.
You called it a doctor.
The AI doctor.
AI doc, yeah.
That is interesting because you bring up a good point that has actually been brought up in other sectors where there's been a lot of automation where you've totally removed even the management. There is an argument to be made that you should start treating these AI agents as people for taxation and liability purposes. So, like, there's been an argument that if you have a machine that takes over all of the functions of a complicated job, a government should actually have good reasoning to tax the productivity of that machine that would have otherwise been the productivity of a person earning a wage. And you could say the same thing for any kinds of insurance that go with that as well. You can kind of you can use the structure you had around the person and kind of retrofit it to wrap around the machine in this sense, to make the system still function adequately. Any thoughts on that?
So you're talking like an AI utilization tax, where it's like if you're using an AI for this stuff, you're going to get taxed on the amount of money it makes you.
Yes. Basically, it's a tax on that productivity as sort of replacing the payroll tax that you would have had otherwise.
I mean, sure. So to answer your question, Quinn, when it's like, why not we'll just use the AI and we'll just have malpractice insurance by the head or by anyone who might be having the problems caused by this AI. And then hopefully the amount of money we pay for malpractice is still not nearly as much as the amount of money we're going to make out of this whole system. And, I think for a lot of quick and small urgent care stuff, I can actually see that. I can see that being like, hey, I got the flu. Can I come in here? Blah, blah, and this stuff. Hey, we assume, and we'll just pay you out if we screw up and blah, blah, blah. Like small stuff like that. But I don't know if you guys have been in a hospital with you know, doctors and nurses and all that stuff in an acute care. If you go up there and you tell someone, don't worry, we have a machine that's doing everything it can to work for you, they're going to look at you in the eye and like, I need a fucking doctor in here. Like, right the fuck now. I don't trust that. Now, whether or not those feelings will go away, you know, I think they'll cool down eventually because people will stop like thinking about Terminator and stuff. But it's the same issue with the debate between, or the issue, like the difference between a DO doctor and an MD doctor. The DO docs were trained to touch our patients a lot more. Where they were trained to give them all these different things that require tactile, like touching of a patient, which they can provide a service there that an AI cannot necessarily provide. Like I can fix your spine for you, Quinn. I can actually like touch you and massage like things that you've never thought were actually able to be relaxed before because that's my training. An
Promise?
AI, well, if you pay me, but an AI not necessarily do that. An MD was not trained to do that, and that's a service like I can provide. Now, an AI, let's say it's able to render judgment, it's able to coordinate all this stuff and do all these different things that a doctor can do. The stipulation is that it is working with information that it assumes is accurate. And a lot of the AI models, they work with like everything that you tell me is true. The issue with medicine is not everything is true. There is an element of error in everything. The patient may not necessarily know the history, and there's a lot of actually like more detective work you have to do as a doctor sometimes to actually figure it out. And unfortunately, the detective work is needed when patients are at their worst.
Yeah.
Because they at that point, like clearly the simple stuff ain't working. So I think you make a point that for lower level stuff, I can see that working. Like patient has a cold, patient needs some cough medicine, patient needs like some stuff to help sleep at night. What's a little bit of Benadryl? Sure. But on the other hand, if patient wants that, why don't they just go to the pharmacy and get it themselves?
Yeah. You know, and at certain rate, that role kind of just replaces WebMD telling people that they have cancer and that they're going to die in 5 hours.
Well, but by the same token, why doesn't the person who needs an oil change it himself?
Exactly.
And I think you bring up a really good point about the tactile aspect of care that is difficult to replace, even if you had like some kind of mobile, very good replacement, that it just becomes so difficult that it doesn't really make any sense in the human aspect of care too, because care is a very human thing. And so it's a very difficult, I would imagine, thing to replace by AI, at least. And even touch, you know, I heard this thing about that the robotics have a very difficult time reconstructing this sense of touch because we don't really fully understand how to mechanically recreate it.
Yeah, because touch itself is a combination of so many different sensations entering the human mind and being processed that literally takes the human mind years and years to actually figure out. That's the whole point of your childhood anyway. AI and machines and all these things, like, yeah, they can do 1, 2, maybe 3 jobs extremely well. And that is always going to be the advantage of a machine. It is a tool that can do something very well. I can't stick my finger through a son's chest, but a spear can do it way better. A gun can do it even better than that because it can just shoot a bullet through it.
I can really tell you're in the army.
But that's the point of a machine, a tool, is that its just job is to do one thing extremely well that a human cannot do. A AI can do all the cerebral aspects of being a doctor, but did it actually look at the patient? Did it actually like sit there and explain to the patient, hey, here is what's going on, and understand where the like faults of a patient's like ability to understand care is? There's a lot of different aspects that even if you got an AI to do, like try and do all this and this and this, is like, you know what, fuck it, just hire the doctors, it's gonna be cheaper.
Yeah.
Like nursing staff, nurses are not gonna be under threat of AI because there's so much variability on the human body the nurse has to deal with already that you're not going to get rid of nurses. I think that's more safer than the doctors, honestly.
So it sounds like the integration of AI is going to be more subtle than maybe some people assume. Well, it's going to be in a lot of operational and rote and simpler stuff at first.
There's a cumbersome aspect to medicine that AI can definitely help with. Like, let's say
note-taking?
So that is definitely one thing that an AI component can help with. Like, especially if you're just sitting there next to a patient, you're explaining everything, and you're like just openly saying like openly dictating your physical exam there, because we already have that function with medical scribes where, you know, we have a person already scribing all that stuff out and building it out already. AI could easily do a lot of that stuff, As long as the physician just looks over, takes a look at the note, and be like, good enough, and signs it, and blah, blah, blah. So I can see AI doing something like that. I can also see an artificial intelligence. If you physician sat at the computer and be like, okay, I want you to go into this journal, pull up everything about heart failure, pull up everything about this, and the time for all this stuff. Granted, you're just paying an AI to do literally something that you can do in 10 seconds already. So I'm not sure that's the most useful. And you have to make sure the hallucination aspect is not there. So you have to be careful with that. But making those, like going into the library, a medical library, to find all these different things used to take forever because you're trying to find this section for this person to find out exactly that. Now we have electronic like literature stuff to get that stuff much faster. And AI is just the next extension of someone bringing the information to you. And
what do you think the end state is for this? Can you even venture a guess?
For AI in medicine?
Yeah, like 50 years from now, what do you think it's going to look like?
So 50 years from now, it's going to be just down to the nurse in control of like the nursing team. I think the nurses are going to like just do that. I think the doctor is just going to
one nurse.
So not like one nurse, but like there's going to be a nurse in charge of the full nursing team, similar to his here. So there's not going to be much changes there because people like having a machine try and change a catheter sounds like a terribly painful process, and I don't necessarily see that.
Sensitive area.
It's a very sensitive area. Where I see doctors in the realm of AI is doctors just sitting there referencing an AI to make sure like everything's good and keep going. It's the only thing that's going to change the efficiency in care. A doctor's going to go from potentially caring from 20 to 25 patients to caring for like 40 to 45, 50 patients at a time. Now, that's in terms of maximum efficiency. Whether or not that's actually going to maintain the same quality of care is different. Because again, people don't know, again, you're not just going to the doctor. For a lot of people, they're not just going to the doctor just to get health. It's, okay, well, what else can you do for me? You start to get to know the doctor. And by providing that therapeutic relationship between a doctor and the patient, there may be things that the doctor starts finding out that the patient wasn't even aware of. Because again, you go into the mechanic because like my car is busted. I don't know what's going on. You go into, and then the mechanic starts asking, well, how does it sound like? All that stuff. So they try teasing out what's actually going on based on what you know, because you may not know what's actually going on. And AI can do that to a limit. But what if two people say something that an AI is not able to differentiate? What if someone says one thing and someone says another thing? Or someone says two people say the same thing that mean completely different things in that context. How was an AI able to differentiate that? An interpretation there. So let's say someone has chest pain. There's 1,000 different ways chest pain can go. My chest hurts. Even if the AI says, oh, can you describe the chest pain? Everyone describes chest pain. Well, there's a bunch of different ways, but they can mean different things to different people still.
How much of this do you think some of this could be a certain amount of anthropocentrism, where you're maybe like, do you really think that an AI in 50 years couldn't determine the difference between one person and another person saying the same thing but meaning different things?
So even if it did, and if the AI screwed up, who's to blame?
Well, then we're back in the question of liability insurance.
And that's the problem. Why do we still have mechanics when we have plenty of machines that can do the works to put cars together?
It's cheaper.
Well,
it's cheaper than the machine.
Cheaper than the machines, yeah. Well, The other thing is that cars are going to probably have fewer parts in the future than they used to, especially if you're considering something like electric cars, where you've removed whole segments of like the drivetrain, and where the motor would normally sit, there's a trunk instead. You just don't take it to the mechanic as often. I don't think you could do that for people. I don't think you're, streamlining the lungs and the liver.
We're gonna fuse into one.
And there's also variability in like. Well, okay, so I know there were some articles before, like someone said, like we made a machine that could pass the medical boards, and I'm like, you don't need to be smart to pass the medical boards. You just need to spend a lot of time studying a bunch of information. But that person could still be a terrible doctor. You know why? So there is a medical condition called a pheochromocytoma. It is a favorite to be tested on. And what it means is basically on your adrenal gland, there's something pumping out the adrenal, like adrenaline, constantly. And it fucks up your body. It fucks up your blood pressure specifically. And it causes all kinds of stuff. On the boards, it almost always comes up and it sounds like, oh man, this thing must be so common. No, it's not. It is one of the most rarest things that's ever happened, and most people never see one in their entire thing of practice. But you say the right words in front of a machine be like, it must be like a pheochromocytoma. We're going to start you on this, this, and this. And suddenly something that was as simple as the patient came in, they were a little anxious going into the clinic. Now is diagnosed with this rare thing. They're getting this massive surgery, and then someone's going there like, what?
The medical board is not enough.
Yeah, because even if you don't, to diagnose something like that, you need to go through extensive laboratory imaging and all this testing even before you get to surgery. So you've exposed someone to radiation, you've exposed them to all this stuff in the pursuit of a diagnosis that was stupid. When a doctor could have sit there and be like, "You feeling nervous right now? Yeah. Okay, let me recheck your blood pressure. Oh, you're doing good." Like,
Well, Dr. Wu, what it sounds like is that the AI just needs to go to residency.
Then it'll learn all those skills.
Exactly.
sure, it can try. It can again, it can learn those skills, and then I'm just gonna go back to it. AI fucks up. Who's responsible? That's why I keep going. That like you can keep thinking, well, what if it does this? Like, okay, yeah,
Well-
but when it screws up, who is liable?
I mean, here's where I go with this reasoning, and maybe this is not the right place to go, but where I go is that we'll just throw enough money at the problem and it goes away. You might have some very large screw ups, but you can price that in. It just depends if the benefit is greater than the cost.
Yeah, and that's kind of what like I said. The alternative was like, well, if we can eat the cost of all these malpractice and liability stuff, and we still come out ahead, well, we can probably do that. Sure. Now put yourself in this position of someone who's very wealthy. Do you want a computer doing your care? Or do you want a doc?
It depends. You probably want both if you're very wealthy.
Well, yeah, you're gonna want a doc who uses an AI. That's the most important.
Yeah.
thing. But you're still gonna want a doctor.
Well, it sounds like you're describing what was that movie with Matt Damon and the floating space city, Elysium?
Elysium.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's we are so far off from whatever technology was in Elysium. Like, again, and also there's also a lot of issues when it comes like even our diagnostics are not like our diagnostic stuff is not without risk. X-ray still has radiation on it. It's not great, but it still has radiation in there. Is it enough to cause any cancer? Probably not. Let's no. A CT scan though is more like something that you would scan someone's head for, and like that's a lot more, it's a lot more radiation there. In general, hopefully you're not gonna be exposed to it a lot to cause like radiation stuff, but there's always that risk. So even before you get to the pharmacological stuff, where we're really putting dosed poison in your body to help save your life, there's a lot of things that can be harmed that an AI may necessarily overutilize a whole bunch of stuff. On the other hand, if the AI underutilizes it, then it goes back to liability.
So very cold calculations.
It's cold calculations. Yeah. And
I
there's
just had a
doctors that do that.
horrific thought. Very dystopian. You've essentially described a situation where an AI doctor becomes the insurance company, where it's now no longer making life and death decisions based on someone's life, but it's making it based on how much it's going to cost the hospital.
And then there's that. So now it's like, is the judgment here based on should we do the most efficient care for cost, efficient for the patient? Because even if you told an AI to like, oh, you need to do everything you can for this patient, okay, with that directive now, you're not going to have efficient care.
Mm-hmm.
So now you see like all these different questions. And again, you can make an AI to potentially try and account for all this and this and this. And the final thing comes to this final issue. What happens when the power goes out?
What does happen if the power goes out?
A doctor can
Humans
work
are
without
wonderful biomechanical machines that can run on the power that it takes to light a fridge light bulb.
power. Exactly. I can do a 24-hour shift running on a cheeseburger. It's not going to feel good, but I can do it. Okay?
Yeah.
An AI machine needs like 10 nuclear reactors and stuff, and all that stuff just to like maintain itself, give you amount of information. But like if the power goes out to the interface to it, if the power goes out in any route between it and me, and it's fucking useless. Does that make sense?
Very good point.
It's a good point. That's another thing. Like again, it has its place, but like an electronic health record, it's very good until the power goes out. Now we're back to paper notes.
Or you get hacked.
Or you get hacked. Exactly. So it opens up a new vulnerability that, again, you would have to deal with. Now, could you make like, oh, we'll make a backup generator. We'll make sure the AI works. Okay. But my issue is not if the AI is working like now, is the AI connected to the network now to actually make sure these information, because now I got to store all this stuff. You see all these cumbersome things that sure, over time can be ironed out. The transition between getting the AI in place of a doctor is so much that it's not going to be anytime soon that if it were to happen, it's not going to happen fast.
Yeah. You've got job security, Dr. Wu.
At least in my lifetime.
Yeah. I can't necessarily say the same. The brokers were already essentially automated away. It's mostly algorithms trading with other algorithms, with the exception of some niche applications.
Yeah.
Drew, I would say some of our role actually already got automated away way before AI.
Yeah.
And we're inherently deriving value out of the niche.
Yeah. I would say for us to do the same job, Quinn, that we do today back in, say, the 80s, we would probably need at least a 20 or 30 man team. And it would be we'd also have to pay for expensive equipment as well. Like even our computers, we'd have to pay for an old school green screen, which would have cost you an arm and a leg. We would have had to have the support of a major firm just to get our information streams. And we'd have to be located physically close to the exchanges in order to do our trading. The fact that we can exist at all is basically thanks to modern technology and connectivity. And we are actually just becoming more efficient as more stuff comes out because we have started to adopt certain AI integration into our systems, and our information systems have also gotten cheaper. And those savings have been passed on to our partners.
Yeah. There's also one example I always like to put, because this is the one that usually people can tangibly understand. Factories came out, and suddenly you don't need a shoemaker anymore, right? You got factories making shoes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens when your shoe's destroyed and you don't want to throw it away? Who do you got to go to?
Cobbler?
Sure. You got people, and there's still that trade is still around, right? Because there's people that still do shoe repairs. Because there's hey, you like your shoes? I can fix this up, scuff here and there. We get those repairs. It's no longer requires massive factories of people, and the industry is not requiring a bajillion moving parts and people, but it's still there, right? It's a niche. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's a cobbler right down the street.
Well, you could even be more extreme in this example. There are still blacksmiths around today making bespoke swords and knives and nails. There's no real practical, necessarily economic reason for there are some economic reasons for them to exist. But for a lot of blacksmiths, they do it more or less as a hobby these days.
Yeah, but again, that's more the hobby because, like, again, people aren't running around with swords anymore.
Yeah.
They're not running around spears. But people have shoes, though, that, sure, they get busted up, they rip out, and like, I don't know, I like my shoes. I'd rather get this thing repaired than, like, throw it away kind of thing.
Although I will say, I did try to get a hiking boot cobbled one time, and I was told flat out they could not repair it because the shoe was not designed to be repaired. I was better off just buying a new boot.
Well, I've had that conversation with patients before. I'm like, well, I can't fix this. Jesus Christ.
Oh, no! You're making the economic choice!
Well, it's more that literally if I try to fix it, it would kill you. So, again, I guess a medicine is a poison based on the dose. So I could try and give you this. It'll probably kill you faster than the actual disease.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
It's a cold calculus.
On that note...
Yeah, pretty much.
This has been The Capital Call with special guest Dr. Nicholas Wu. I'm Quinn Millegan.
I'm Drew Millegan.
Appreciate you guys having me.